Oh, hey, fabulous fifth graders. Just got back from a good bike ride. It's a wonderful day for a ride. Let me get my helmet off and we'll go back into the art studio and see what we can work on today. Okay, be right back. Hey, I got a little distracted after my bike ride, so I haven't been back to the studio until today. And it's raining. It's a horrible day for a bike ride, but it's a great day to make art, so I'm glad we're back together. So what we're going to be doing is an extension of what we learned about the color wheel and a little bit more about color theory and how color works in art. And while I gather some materials for our project, I hope that you'll enjoy watching a little presentation by Julian from Flow Graphics. So as soon as that's over, I'll show you what materials we'll need and we'll get started.
To start with hue. This is pretty straightforward and it's pretty easy to understand. Hue is essentially what color the color is. So if I draw a little graph here, I'm going to draw red in the middle, we'll draw orange, yellow, we'll draw purple next to the red, and then pink. You can see this color is basically changing. Essentially, hue is just what color it is. So if we have a color red here and we duplicate this and we change it, we've just shifted the hue from a red to an orange. And then we've shifted the hue to the orange to a yellow, and then we've shifted the hue from a yellow to a green, and so on. It's basically just what color you have selected. The next is saturation. So this is a word you're probably going to see a lot if you work with Photoshop or any sort of digital program, and you'll probably hear it a lot too in the art world. This is essentially the intensity of the color. This doesn't change how light or dark the color it is. It doesn't change what the color is. It just changes how intense that actual color is. So like you can see on my screen, I've got a bunch of dots. The left-hand dot is 100% saturated. The right-hand dot is 0% saturated. So no saturation of a color is just gray. And this applies for any color. So you can see as I shift these colors around here, the left is always saturated. The right is always not saturated. So fully saturated green, slowly getting desaturated into gray. The next is lightness, and this can also be split up into tints and shades. So this is basically how bright or dark a color is. This doesn't affect the hue or the saturation or anything like that. It's basically just adding white or black into the color. So if I sort of draw some little rectangles here, you can see I'm sort of making them lighter and lighter. So they're basically tints, and then I'll make some more and I'll make it darker and darker, and these are some shades. So you can see the darkest color is sort of like a dark brown, but it's still quite saturated and rich in color. And then the light color is basically like a pink, and it still has a lot of color, it's just very light. So you can sort of use a general term to call it lightness or brightness of the color, or if you just make it darker, it's called a shade. If you make it lighter, it's called a tint. So next up is color groups. This is probably one of the more confusing parts of color theory. I'll try to make it pretty straightforward for you all because it's pretty simple once you understand it. So I'm going to draw a little color wheel here, and I'm basically going to show how different colors relate to each other. Essentially, color groups are basically just color schemes. You could use these color schemes for an artwork or for a painting or anything you're creating. It's just a way that colors can look cool together and sort of interact with each other. So what I've drawn right here is a monochromatic color scheme. It's essentially what we just talked about with tints and shades, except only one color. So if I was to make a painting just out of reds and nothing else, that would be a monochrome color scheme, and it's one type of color scheme that we can use. The next is analogous, or analog for short, I guess you could say, and this is basically what color is next to another color. So I'm going to draw a little color wheel here, and this sort of analog color scheme is basically picking 3 colors on this color wheel, and they all just need to sit next to each other. So if I draw some little lines here, let's say we're going to pick yellow, and then we'll pick orange in the middle, if we spell it right, and then we'll pick red too. And that's an analogous color scheme. We've picked 3 colors that all sit next to each other. And this can apply for any colors. So if I just rotate this over here and spin it around, it can work for any colors. So I could pick a green, a yellow and an orange. I could pick a blue, a purple and a red. They just need to sit next to each other in the color wheel. Next is complementary. You'll probably hear this a lot in sort of art and design, and this is basically colors that are opposite each other in the color wheel. You've probably seen a lot of movie posters love to use the colors orange and blue. They're complementary colors. They work really good together. Same with green and red and yellow and purple. So basically, it doesn't matter what the colors are. They just need to be opposite each other in the color wheel, and they are complementary colors. The next color group we're going to talk about is triadic. So this is essentially making a triangle on the color wheel. So if we pick orange, green, and purple, make a little triangle, that's a triadic color scheme. They all sit at a triangle's point away from each other. So if you just made a perfect triangle anywhere in the color wheel, as long as they all sit evenly, that's a triadic color scheme. There's a lot more color schemes than these ones I've just listed here, though these are sort of the core fundamental color schemes or color groups. And one of the most important parts is the meaning behind colors. So a lot of people don't actually understand that a lot of colors are picked for very specific reasons, and each color actually has a meaning behind it, and it gives off a certain emotion. Whether you like it or not, each color actually does have emotion and meaning behind it for anybody. It's not subjective. All of these colors do actually give off a bodily sort of emotion and an impact that we don't actually realize. So red is most commonly associated with passion and danger and fire and heat. That's why stop signs are red. Orange is often associated with energy and creativity. Yellow is sort of happiness, joyfulness, energy, being active. You'll see this a lot with advertising, people using these colors as well. Black is sort of obvious. It's really associated with death and also power as well. Green, most commonly associated with nature, as well as healing and medicine. You see a lot of health symbols in games be green for this reason. Blue is also a calming color. You see a lot of hospitals painted blue for this reason. It's also associated with wisdom. Purple is often associated with wealth. Actually, the reason this is because the color purple, the actual dye, was a lot harder to create and make a few hundred years ago. So it was often only sort of worn by kings and queens and royals. So that's why it's sort of associated with that. And white is obviously known as sort of purity and peace, basically the opposite of black. We also have warm and cool colors. Green is somewhat of a neutral color, but let's just say it's cool. So obviously red, orange, yellow are all somewhat warm colors. Blue, purple, and green are somewhat cool colors. And you can also make any color on a color wheel warm or cool. So I've duplicated the green here, so you can see the dot on the left of the green has a bit more yellow added to it, so it's a bit more warm. And then the dot to the right of the green dot has a bit more blue added to it, so it's a bit more of a turquoisey color, and that's more of a cool color. So if people refer to warm or cool colors, it's essentially how much yellow or how much blue has been added to a color. So yellow being warm, blue being cold.
All right, well, these are the materials you're going to need for your project. You'll need some kind of paper. It can be drawing paper if you have some. Could be just your paper from your printer at home. If you have a computer printer, that'd be great. Or if you don't have anything else, just notebook paper would be fine for this. You'll need some crayons. Broken ones are fabulous. We're going to use those in a different way. Then you'll need a pencil or a marker. If you have a black marker, they work great. If not, we'll just use a pencil. If you have a compass, you can use that. If you don't have a compass, just find some round objects that you could trace. Don't use your mom's good dishes because we don't want to get marker on that. This is just an old laundry cap, a spool of thread. This is the top from a laundry thing, I think. This is the top to, I think my husband's coffee. I'm not sure. This is just a roll of tape. So anything that you can trace around to make a circle would be fine. Then you also need a straight edge, so you could use a ruler. And if you don't have a ruler, you can make a straight edge. Just, let me move this, just by folding a piece of paper a couple of times. And then you can use that straight edge of the paper to make straight lines. So now that we have those supplies all gathered, I'll show you what we're going to do. During Julian's presentation, he introduced 4 different color schemes: monochromatic, analogous. He pronounced it a little bit differently than that, but we generally say analogous, complementary, and triadic. Now our focus for our project will be on one of these color schemes and the use of geometric shapes. Remember, geometric shapes are shapes that have rules, they must follow certain rules. Organic or free shapes don't have those specific rules. They free flowing, as long as they close, they make a shape. Now there have been quite a few artists in art history that used geometric shapes as the theme for their artwork. One was Frank Stella, Jean Albert Gorin, Robert Delaunay, and Sonia Delaunay. Now Sonia Delaunay has a very interesting history, and I hope that you'll follow the links attached to our lesson to learn more about her. But viewing all of their artwork, you can tell that they're very much concentrated on using geometric shapes and organize them into pleasing compositions. Remember, composition means how things are arranged in a work of art. And these artists were very good at it. Please go on to part 2.